Newspapers were never 100% free of error. Sometimes the mistakes were a result of haste or limitation. But other times, the distortions were intentional, deliberate attempts to create a different narrative. Publicity offices in early Hollywood attracted a new breed of journalist who swore an oath of royalty to a studio. Like the man chosen to rescue Ben-Hur in Italy, they remained dedicated to putting out the truth, and often as not, in keeping it out. The first motion picture actors were not identified by name. Many were moonlighting from the so-called legitimate stage and were not eager to have their identities known. The person most instrumental in changing that was a populist U.S. political figure and future president. Theodore Roosevelt had been a sickly boy, but he embraced flickers as a way of promoting a new, larger-than-life public image. Between 1898 and his death in 1919, Teddy Roosevelt starred in over 100 short films and actualities that cemented his influence and helped him to get policies made into law. Actors began to see the value of a recognizable name, even if it was not their real one. Meanwhile, the movie industry as a whole sought help in defending its reputation. Even some established screen idols needed help in undoing the damage done through excesses of their own making. The importance of branding oneself in the popular imagination became more glaringly apparent. An advertising man named Edward Bernays, the American nephew of psychologist Sigmund Freud, codified the need in a new profession he termed public relations. While not exactly a social science, it applied new principles of human behavior to the field of consumerism. It was a disciple of Edward Bernays himself who would soon be called on to save Ben-Hur in Italy. That man was dapper New York advertising man Lou Marangella. Marangella's family was among the millions of Italian immigrants coming through Ellis Island at the start of the last century. Still a toddler, Louis learned English and gravitated to the opportunities of show business. He was social and outgoing, developing skills as a songwriter and promoter with pal Eddie Bonds. When Bonds went to work at MGM, he got Lou a small role in a Todd Browning movie. While it opened no doors to him as an actor, it did provide him access to executives at MGM. Ben-Hur was part of the package acquired in the merger with Goldwyn Pictures. It was arguably the biggest best-selling property to ever hit Hollywood, but by early 1924, the production on location in Rome was also a non-stop headache. The public's thirst for information was being met with ever more alarming headlines from abroad. Staff changes and labor strikes were making the whole overseas company the butt of jokes. One popular gag had it that by the time Ben-Hur was finished, child actor Jackie Coogan might be ready to step into the lead. MGM knew it had to do something about the bad press. Lou Marangella had been busily promoting himself ever since getting to Los Angeles. He was now put forward as a former Warner Brothers publicist who knew the business. Plus, he could actually communicate with Italians. By late summer 1924, Marangella was on his way back to Italy with a mandate to save Ben-Hur. His first dispatches home were mostly gossip about Italian fashions and the shopping habits of cast members. FredNiblo, MGM's newly installed director, was trying to get things back on track. At first, he hated being ordered to take part in Marangella's publicity stunts, but after a while he got in the spirit of the thing. When it was learned Jackie Coogan's family was vacationing in Rome, Marangella invited them to the Ben-Hur set. Sending the photo to the press was one way of thumbing one's nose at the naysayers back home. While Marangella's mastery of Italian was limited at best, it became highly useful to the company. It helped them avoid labor arbitrations and shutdowns. When sabotage was suspected after a fire at the studio, Marangella managed to keep news of the investigation out of the papers. That relationship with local editors paid off handsomely when two serious incidents arose nearly back-to-back. The first catastrophe was a fire aboard the flagship during the filming of a sea battle at Livorno. A small, contained fire leapt out of control and ripped across the deck, forcing surprised extras to jump overboard. Eyewitness accounts of drownings and burns were confined to a local paper, thanks to Marangella. The next month, at least one stuntman was killed during the staging of the chariot race. Dozens of injured Arabian horses had to be destroyed, and clashes between pro-Mussolini and anti-fascist forces resulted in numerous stabbings and head wounds. Even as Marangella was struggling to keep these stories out of the papers, Hollywood was readying big news of its own. Marcus Lowe of MGM announced he was ordering the Ben-Hur company back to Culver City, where work on the movie would continue under more favorable conditions. Marangella stayed behind to shape the official studio narrative of events. According to that version, absolutely no lives were lost in the chariot race. The only injuries at Livorno were sustained by Italian extras, who, quote, forgot their safety instructions. MGM's religious epic was nothing less than a modern miracle. Marangella celebrated the end of his job by getting married in Paris to 26-year-old Olga Calvet. She was a Russian émigré with ambitions as an actress. Once back in LA, he helped her get a small part at MGM in a John Gilbert film. But when her screen career fizzled, so did her enthusiasm for being Mrs. Marangella. Like Edward Bernays and others who sought to blur the line between fact and delusion, Lou Marangella had his hour of fame and a sampling of power. But in the end, he made peace with obscurity. He passed away in 1980 and was laid to rest in New Jersey, only miles away from where he started.